Everybody, here we are, almost 2021, and I wanted to get to you before 2021 gets here because there's things that you need to know which are going to happen and which have been in the works, why we've been distracted, why we've been thinking that the stuff we've been paying attention to has been important. And yes, racial injustice is important. Yes, women's rights on abortion is important, but there are other matters, pending matters, things that are going to pass in 2021 that has to do with our future of our children, that has to do with these diseases that keep coming out of nowhere, that has to do with these forced vaccines and why they are so important and being pushed on us. It seems like the things I've been keeping track on in the world in general, just not America, but the whole world, that these vaccines and these agendas with these gene drives are being forced on us from all directions. And the name that we keep hearing the most is Bill Gates, Bill Gates, Bill Gates. Fauci's popped up because of the COVID, but Fauci's been around for 53 years. You know, he was there before AIDS, came in. And, his name came up, I think it was Dr. Mikovits, she's in my slides, and she was very adamant about what he did to her when they worked together at NIH. And he, basically just punked her, went in there, took her files, told her to get out, threatened her. You always be suspicious of these quiet little ones who sit in the background. And then all of a sudden they come out and they appear to be the hero. This has happened to him twice now, where two deadly diseases have came to us, and he's been the one who takes credit for this. And this has to stop, because this is a Frankenstein, Dr. Moreau, really nasty, dirty stuff going on. And Bill Gates has no medical background. He has no scientific background. He's not even ethical in what he does as a tech person. If you want to be helpful, when the COVID virus came through your friend Fauci over here, if you wanted to be helpful, what you should have been doing is helping these schools with technology who didn't have laptops and things of that sort to access education with. That's where you come in, Bill Gates. We don't need you injecting mosquitoes and throwing your weight around in Africa and South America, where you're not needed, nor are you wanted, nor are your experiments wanted, which has been said to you, it has been written to you, it has been announced to you through these biotech companies that you have funneled all this money to, on the guise of trying to help these countries, these poor people, these people who need your help. They don't want it. So I start this slide and it says greed, God complexes, and because that's what I feel it is. It's a God complex when these men have this need to feel like they are the creators. They are the ones, with Bill Gates wanting to push these gene drives where he can change genetics in humans and in insects and in plants and come up with his own varieties, where he believes in decreasing population. And that's where eugenics comes in. This stuff doesn't go away. America has a very dark history when it comes to eugenics. And I'm going to get to that. And Fauci and Bill Gates, when they met, it was like love at first sight. You have this tech giant who wants to somehow be in the medical field because that's money. And you have this little man who's been in medicine with diseases, playing with them, fiddling with them, changing them, remolding them and making them into these monster germs. And they met, and ever since then it's been chaos. So I have this saying in the Bible that I really like, and it says they will fight their way into the kingdom of heaven. And then it says, but where is the kingdom of heaven? And it is within you. And that is basically what they're trying to do. When you're being bombarded with all this stuff physically, you don't realize that that's not what they're really after. It's what mankind has been after for years, and that's the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. These guys here think that the perfect human is like them, money hungry, full of knowledge about this world and nothing else. And it just, while you're feeding the brain, your heart is just cold and empty, and the tree of life in them is completely dead. And they think that that is the way humanity should be. Eugenics, compulsory sterilization in 50 American states. Compulsory sterilization laws adopted by over 30 states that led to more than 60,000 sterilizations of disabled individuals. Many of these individuals were sterilized because of disability. They were mentally disabled or ill, or belonged to socially disadvantaged groups, living on the margins of society. American eugenic laws and practices were implemented in the first decade of the 20th century, influenced the much larger National Socialist Compulsory Sterilization Program, which between 1934 and 1945 led to approximately 350,000 compulsory sterilizations and was a stepping stone to the Holocaust. Do you hear that? A stepping stone to the Holocaust. And during this time, sterilizations of Native America in the 1970s, which by some account, the sterilization rates were more than 25% among women of childbearing ages. Hey, my end's missing. So listen, this isn't new. This has been in practice. There are people, these people with money think that they know, what our planet needs, and they believe that those who are not like them are degenerates. And back then, even when they're saying this, it's kind of like when they were saying like the uneducated, or they were calling them feeble-minded. When you weren't educating half the world because of their color, or because of they were poor, or for many other reasons, and you had your selected few who were allowed to attend schools and colleges, yeah, of course some people weren't as smart as what you think they should be. It's just, you can't wrap your head around the stupidity. The shameful history of forced sterilization in the U.S. And listen, yes, there's racial injustice, but when it comes to something like this, we must understand that what we're dealing with, they don't care about color. Do you understand that this is being done for reasons to them where they feel like they're going to build this superior world? So if you're white and you think, that's the black people's problem, that's the immigrants. The immigrants shouldn't be here anyway. Let's build that wall. It's not just about blacks and immigrants. It's white people too. They've done this too. Okay, because they felt like you were feeble-minded, or you were poor, or even marginal. You weren't poor, you were middle class. It still wasn't where they are, because listen, you're millionaires now, and your billionaires are trillionaires. So to them, middle class, you're poor, okay, and you're feeble-minded. So join us. So in 1948, when he was 14 years old, Lynch was sterilized on the recommendation of North Carolina's Eugenic Board, because this young man was living in a foster home, and all the kids they felt like who were in foster homes, or if they were homeless, that they were feeble-minded and nobody wanted them. They didn't want them to have children because they had no hopes for them, even though, there's tons of kids who've come out of shelters and who've been homeless and who went on to go to college and do great things with their lives. And there's been a lot of kids who are raised by millionaires and billionaires who are embarrassing, who don't know how to listen, who have been in prison and incarcerated, who have been carrying child pornography on their computers, who have bought their own islands and carried on, shameful and disgusting, deviant things there. So we're not even going to go there, because the problem is that we're judging what people's state of mind is, and we're judging people on the amount of money they make. A crazy person can win the freaking lottery. That doesn't make them better than somebody else because they don't have what they want, or they're not the same skin color. It's time for us to stop acting beneath the animals. And you know what? That's offensive to the animals, because the animals the leopard doesn't look at the tiger and beat him up because he has stripes and one has dots. It just sounds crazy. Do you know what I mean? The flowers don't sit out there and not look up and praise the sun every day because he's not purple, he's yellow. Like, we're crazy. Something's wrong with us. We gotta be above this stuff by now. Even in the newspaper printed back then, it said 15 million Americans, okay, they're defective. Now, this is what I'm telling you about the boldness back then. This is the difference. And you know what? I appreciate the boldness, because I'd rather you come in my face and say, you know what? You're defective. Like, we just, yeah, I'll be all right with that, because sometimes I have to say to myself, like, oh, you know, you got issues. But at least they were put in the paper, you know? Eugenics enterprise organized for sterilization of unfit of nation. It's a gigantic eugenic enterprise. So it was a big thing. Like, they were getting together. They was going to toss out all these defectives. And this is stuff that used to be in the newspaper. And until people, you know, we're still evolving because we've become smarter. You know what I mean? We know not to throw our kids in the back of the pickup trucks and ain't flip-flopping around with the dog falling on top of them. Do you know what I mean? We know kids stop eating the dirt. Like, we're evolving. Like, we're getting smarter. We're realizing that, you know, we're all different, but we're all human. So when they were doing this at the time, it was acceptable. We were like, whoa, okay, I hope, you know, trying to smarten ourselves off so we weren't in the 15 million Americans that were defective. But they used to also post when they were going to do weather modification, until General Electric flooded out in the Midwest, and the Midwest sued General Electric. Farmers did a lawsuit, so then they stopped saying that, and they started making us think we were crazy when we see these airplanes spraying all this crap and injecting the clouds, and they tell us, it's vapor, because they got sued. It's all about money. Everything we're going to talk about right now all falls on money. When it says money is the root of all evil, it doesn't mean money is evil. It means when you start digging and undoing that Gordian knot, you realize that the only reason these people were so disgusting and were doing all these disgusting things is because they got their hands around that money, and they don't want to let it go, and they just see it piling up, and it's crazy. It's psychopathic. Something's wrong. Between 1929 and 1974, North Carolina sterilized more than 7,600 individuals in the name of improving the state's human stock. Do you hear what I just said? This means a group of people who work for the state, who work for the people, said, we need to improve our stock, our human stock. By the time the program was halted, the majority of those neutered were young, Black, poor women like Elaine Riddick. And just like Lynch, you know, he was in the same, they both were in North Carolina, so this happened to both of them, him white, her Black, it didn't matter. They came up with an excuse why he had to be castrated, sterilized, and they came up with an excuse for her. They told her she was feeble-minded. They told him almost the same thing. Until this day, he doesn't understand what happened and why he can't have children. He understands, but it's like, why me? Why did this happen? And just recently, immigration detention and coerced sterilization. History tragically repeats itself. And this is what I'm talking about. Through this whole thing, you're going to see that history is repeating itself. Okay, it's like a fungus, and this fungus just keeps, when you have law of attraction, when you have like minds they stick this racism in their head, and it's a priority, it allows like a disease for it to reemerge again. But it just goes deeper and deeper, and it just goes more hidden, because they're not going to put it in the newspaper, are they? Because they'll get sued for that. You know, times have changed. They weren't getting sued. They could say whatever crazy stuff they wanted to say back then. The ICE detention story reflects a long pattern in the United States of the coerced sterilization of marginalized populations, particularly of Black, Latinx, and indigenous peoples. Okay? Hitler said there is today one state in which at least weak beginnings towards a better conception of citizenship are noticeable. Of course, it's not our model, German Republic, but the United States. Hitler looked towards the United States. And then we went to war with Hitler, but Hitler looked towards us. He said, wow, look at that. In the early 20th century across the country, medical superintendents, I want you to listen to who was all in on this. Medical superintendents, legislators, and social reformers affiliated with an emerging eugenics movement joined forces to put sterilization laws on the books. There goes that good old state legislation in our government looking out for us. That must have been what we need. Put that sterilization law on the books. Such legislation was motivated by crude theories of human heredity that posited the wholesale inheritance of traits associated with a panoply of feared conditions such as criminality, feeble-mindedness, and sexual deviance. Most sterilization advocates viewed reproductive surgery as a necessary public health infrastructure. It's necessary. You see what I mean? Now, I want you to listen to this stuff because this is what's been spewed at us right now. It's necessary. The poor, the victims, the feeble, the most vulnerable. These are the words you keep hearing because the more you hear it, you're going to believe it and you're going to say, they need it. This is what we need. For 70 years in California, beginning in 1909, approximately 20,000 sterilizations took place in the state of California, and then 32 states followed. Now, since we're back here, let's jog on up to 2006, 2010, because this isn't so far away. Now, I want you to listen to this part when every time we say, something about Bill Gates or something about Fauci, everybody jumps in. Oh, those poor men, all they're doing is trying to save the world. They're trying to help, and everybody keeps, I know they regret even trying to help these people. Okay, let me tell you something. The article from the Center for Investigation Report reveals how the state, you hear that? The state, this is a state, the people that we have voted for, that we have put in their positions, they paid doctors, the ones that we trust with our medical health, when we go in, that when they put us under for something, they're not taking out our insides, they're not taking my fallopian tubes, they're not twisting up your reproductive system, okay? The state paid doctors almost $200,000 to perform tubal ligations that former inmates said were done under coercion. So the state paid the doctors to do this. So it wasn't a hidden agenda per se. It wasn't in the newspapers and they didn't tell us, but, the person they were doing it to was told that they had cancer, this would be the best option. They were coerced into doing it. Now, that I've updated you on what eugenics were, updated you on how we were involved in them as a country and a state. Now we move on to why Bill Gates. Why so many people are screaming, Bill Gates, Bill Gates. What does this man have to do with anything? I don't understand. Poor man. He's just trying to help the Africans. This man is putting all his money into Africa and South America, and we just cannot appreciate him. Let's see. Mosquitoes as biological weapons to spread disease and cause infertility. Depopulation? Oxitec's Bill and Melinda Gates have outsourced and funded biotech companies whose technology aims to prevent the progeny, let's say reproduction, of GM mosquitoes from surviving in the wild. The fact that it fails and the presence of low levels of tetracycline is a cause for concern. So these mosquitoes, they will still reproduce if they are reproducing where there's tetracycline, which is a antibiotic. And so they're saying, how is it going to work? Because they do, come in contact with that when they're out. So how does that work? And it raised concerns because these genetically modified mosquitoes surviving and breeding, producing adult populations of GM mosquitoes, including GM females, which can bite and transmit diseases. So they're GM mosquitoes. They injected them, gene modified them with an injection, like a gene modified vaccine, the COVID vaccine that's modified, and it's the gene of the COVID that mutates. Yeah, that one. Another one that Bill and Melinda Gates funded was Target Malaria. We'll read more about them. Emerging AG, whose purpose is to increase awareness, understanding, and acceptance of possible gene drive applications for the public good purpose. They want to educate us. That's what they're going to educate us on accepting these gene drives and let us know how safe. Now, they haven't done any tests. They have no long-term studies. They have no data, but they're going to make us believe it. A conversation with Bill Gates on population growth. This was in 2012, and Bill Gates basically said the population percentage-wise, which are the smart people, are growing slower today than in the past, and so it is actually going to peak out the problem. So they're having less children because they're wiser. But it's the population that's growing the fastest where the people are less able to deal with it because, you know, Africans can't deal with all them children, neither can South America. They can't handle it. It's the very poorest places, you know, like with COVID. We're suffering. It's the poor. It's because they're poor. It's not because they don't have the proper medical. It's not because these rich people are putting money back into the communities instead of shooting up mosquitoes. It's because they're just poor and they can't handle children. And so their ability to feed and educate, provide job stability, protect the environment in those locations. And he already calculated all this. The very poor places that you're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. So he's already sat down. This man, he's like, let's see, Africa, they got this, Uganda, they got that, South America, triple, double. So he's added this up, and now it's 2020. And he said by 2050, right? So my calculations by going from infertility is what he's trying to do. If he started this already, and then COVID came 2020, so he's saying by the time our children, because if we get this vaccine, this affects your children. So if you're giving birth this year and you had the vaccine, or even next year, so then by the time kids and people are in their 30s, so basically what he's saying is that this population, to him, this is a problem. I don't hear anything about malaria. I don't hear anything about any other diseases. I hear him calculating about population. And the problem with the poor people is that the people he feels like shouldn't be having children are going to triple in population, where the wise ones aren't. So then who's going to be the minority? GM mosquitoes and gene drive, What is a genetically modified mosquito? GM mosquitoes are mosquitoes that have been implanted with a gene. So if they can, okay, do you know the size of a mosquito, right? You know the size of a mosquito. So they're implanting these mosquitoes. They're changing their genes, okay? They can be implanted with a gene or bacteria which was not originally present or naturally occurring in the insect. In one case, the implant in question is a self-limiting gene. So remember we were talking about eugenics. That disrupts the normal processing of mosquitoes' offspring. These offspring will in turn not survive to adulthood. So they're saying they'll not survive into adulthood. So basically stop reproduction, okay? The latest grant, this was in 2005, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, $258.3 million to Oxytech. And then they did another one for a UC Irvine project where they were going to do a select field test in Southeast Asia and Latin America. And the researchers were basically saying that they're going to try to reduce or eliminate mosquito population. Okay, and I keep telling people, I'm like, this was a forerunner to COVID. STDs, if you look them all up, your sexually transmitted diseases, all of them, if you don't take care of them, can lead to sterilization. And all of these are man-made diseases, okay? These are diseases, it's a new type of eugenics used to slow down population. And in hopes, like you had your Tuskegee Airmen where they did the syphilis, it wasn't that they were just doing experiments to just experiment on syphilis. They knew what syphilis did. They had a cure for syphilis. But the point of syphilis with African American men was to make them sterile. And if they passed it on to the women, it would have been the same thing. And the reason they let it go on so long is because they wanted to see if it did cause sterilization. That was why, okay? Just to put that out there. Scientists can't agree on whether genetically modified mosquito experiment went horribly wrong. Shocking. We just released all these genetically modified mosquitoes. We have no information. We don't, we didn't want to do it in a controlled, because we have no paper showing what happened in a controlled experiment. So we just released all of these, but we did it in Brazil, South America, Africa, so when diseases break off, they can never say it came from America, because it came from all these third world countries, where we always put on TV that they're so bad and suffering, and because we're making them suffer. From 2013 to 2015, an English biotech company released millions of genetically modified mosquitoes into Brazil in an effort to reduce the number. This is what they say. They were trying to reduce the native disease-carrying mosquitoes. But unexpectedly, some of the gene-edited mosquitoes passed on their genes to the native insects. How could it be unexpected? How do you not know? What was your plan on keeping track of these mosquitoes? The biotech company called Oxitec, who was funded by Bill Gates, released around 450,000 genetically modified male mosquitoes into Brazil each week for 27 months. These mosquitoes were altered such that they carry a lethal gene. A lethal gene is a gene that is capable of causing the death of an organism, usually during the development of an embryo. So now I want you to look at that. From 2013 to 2015, you see that? Let's see, can I point that? Here we go. 2013 to 2015. So let's jump over here. Do we remember in early 2015 what happened in Brazil? A widespread epidemic of Zika fever caused by the Zika virus in Brazil and spread out to South and North America. What happens with Zika virus? Zika virus can be passed from a pregnant woman to her fetus. The lethal gene that is capable of causing the death of an organism, usually during the development of an embryo. An infection during pregnancy can cause a birth defect called microcephaly. Did I say that right? I don't know. Microcephaly and other severe fatal brain defects to the pregnant woman and her fetus. This sounds similar, right? Right? Just so happened when they're running these experiments with these mosquitoes that carry a disease that would hurt the embryo, that when Zika breaks off, because this is their testing ground, right? It's a sexually transmitted disease meant to what? Sterilize. Next. These revelations come on the heel of a public warning issued by a leading gene drive researcher, Dr. Kevin Esvelt, that current gene drives are too powerful to be used in conservation. Okay? There's been scientists after scientists after scientists after scientists who keep telling them to stop. But Bill Gates has his agenda, Fauci has his agenda, and they just push it through each time. We're also dealing with DARPA, who's a United States funded military program, and they are revealed to be funding a high-profile UK team of researchers, and Oxitec is a UK team of researchers targeting African communities with gene drive mosquitoes. So let me put two together. DARPA funding a UK team of researchers, Oxitec and Target Malaria, who are in Africa, and they're doing gene drive mosquitoes. I would not have to be a genius, but I would think that must be them. And here's all the places: North Carolina, Australia, New Zealand, Burkina Faso. Remember that, because we're going to get to there in a second. Gene drives are basically a technology that aims for a targeted species to go extinct. You hear that? Gene drives are basically a technology that aims at a targeted species to go extinct. Many scientists agree that gene drives are a double-edged sword. Gene drives are a classic dual-use technology, meaning that the technology for gene drives developed for one use could be used as a weapon or biological agent. For example, a gene drive mosquito can be engineered to be used in a positive way, or it can be used to spread lethal toxins. Okay? So what I don't understand is why it keeps being okay for these guys to go to whatever environment they want and just release these mosquitoes. I don't, where are the regulations? Like what, like why is this allowed with nothing to back up, no evidence to say that this even works, no closed indoor studies. You know why? We're going to show you why. There was a secret release of GM mosquitoes in the Cayman Islands, okay? And a lot of people were questioning why did they do it so quietly and that this would trigger a backlash. And then the Cayman Islands abandons Oxitec failed, you hear that? Failed GM mosquito project, okay? There was no license. They were told that there would only be male mosquitoes, and they found a lot of female mosquitoes which could bite and potentially transmit disease. So they told Oxitec to get out. A failed project. DARPA funding work targeting Africans. So here we go again. They dug up over 1,200 emails, okay, that the U.S. military is now the top funder and influencer behind a controversial genetic extinction technology known as gene drives. Yeah? Emerging AG, a private PR firm paid by Gates Foundation, is working behind the scenes. Now, what Gates was doing is while this is going on and they're working on these gene drives and they're putting all the money in it, and they know that doing gene drives, it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of red tape. So what he did is he stacked the UN full of his own people. He said, if I put my yes man in these seats, then I can get these things pushed through. And that's what he's doing. He's putting his own people in key places, just like they did with the Supreme Court. Just that it's not all about overturning the abortion law. It's about being able to push through this genetic technology. It's being able to push through these eugenic ideas. Do you understand? Because the less people and the less tape they have to get through, as you already see, they're just letting go of these mosquitoes anywhere they want to, even though the residents and the communities and the governments are saying, get out of here. They're doing it anyway. Here we go, Burkina Faso, Africa. We, the undersigned civil society organizations from Africa and around the world, denounce the release of genetically modified mosquitoes in Burkina Faso. The release of GM mosquitoes in the village was an unethical experiment. As Target Malaria, Bill Gates, acknowledges that there are no direct benefits to the local population of this particular GM mosquito release in terms of malaria control. Now listen to this. This was not an early stage trial of the GM mosquitoes intended to be tested later for their impact on malaria, but a release of an entirely different GM mosquito. While Target Malaria claims that the number will be small, nevertheless, since GM female mosquitoes can bite humans and spread disease, the release of biting females still possess some risk to local people. The releases in Burkina Faso are the first open releases of GM mosquitoes in Africa. Previous releases of different GM mosquitoes in other parts of the world have been littered with failures, false claims, lack of adequate risk assessments, and flouting of international and local regulations. We are deeply unhappy that once again, Africa has become a testing ground for risky technologies. They're done. This is July 2019. This is before COVID. Here we are with all this gross negligence. of doing what we want to people who don't want you in there. And as you claim to be helping these poor people seem very educated, and they seem to know what they do and do not want. And what they don't want is your Frankenstein mosquitoes up in their country, eating up their folks and spreading your nasty tech germ Franken virus diseases. Put it in your house with your wife and your kids. Over it. Gene drives and STDs. Gene drives only work in sexually reproducing species. Okay? Gene drives force an artificially engineered trait to spread through the natural population until it becomes ubiquitous or crashes the population. The first working gene drives were demonstrated at the end of 2014 using a gene editing technique which everyone's been hearing about, known as CRISPR-Cas9. They work by setting up a genetic enforcement mechanism which copies itself from parent to child, cascading from one generation to the next by sexual reproduction. Hello, I want you to wake up and hear this. The new coronavirus can persist in men's semen even after they have begun to recover, a finding that raises the possibility the virus could be sexually transmissible. And who is the right man to contact when you need a super spreader STD? Booyaka. In 1968, Dr. Fauci, I like that better, came to the National Institute of Health, NIH, as a clinical associate as a National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID. He was the NIH AIDS coordinator before being appointed as the first director of the Office of AIDS Research. Okay, I want you to look at that date, 1968. The theory that AIDS is a man-made disease is largely based on research showing an intimate connection between government vaccine experiments and the outbreak of AIDS. So I want you to notice, because this is, this is the same steps. This is his MO. Gay men were avidly sought as volunteers to test the effectiveness of a newly developed hepatitis B vaccine manufactured by Merck. And the reason I highlighted this is because you're going to see this name come up tied with Fauci again. In the National Institute of Health from 1978 to 1981, there is no doubt that AIDS erupted in the U.S. shortly after the government-sponsored hepatitis B vaccine experiment in 1978 through 1981. The reason this is so important, because I know you guys keep hearing in the news that Fauci was told to stop doing the experiments that he was doing with monster germs, that the Obama administration had contacted them and said, we've heard about you messing with MERS, SARS, and the influenza, and that you're trying to make this biological weapon using these viruses, and we're very nervous about what will happen. So Bill Gates is no oracle. He was friends with Fauci, and when he knew that Fauci was doing this, he then, there's going to be a damn pandemic. I'm telling you, because he had his money. He'd been waiting because his mosquitoes weren't getting the job done fast enough. Do you see what I'm saying? So in the background, they're working on gene-based vaccines. They're working on diseases. They're working on eugenics. This man is basically controlling our world, is what we've given him, by constantly him flashing that little bit of money, this bored little nerd, flashing his money, being able to play us like chess pieces, because he's bored. He said it before, once you get $1 million, it's all like the same hamburger. Do you know what I mean? That's what he says, it's like the same burger. Because once you done made so much, the next that come. But that still doesn't mean that you're not bored and you're trying to find some other thing to put your fingers in and to meddle in. We should not be seeing Bill Gates this much. Like, he has nothing to do with diseases. And remember, so here's the AIDS virus, right? Here's Fauci in the middle of it all. At the time, gays were seen as the less, like, people did not like them. They thought they were degenerates. We got to get rid of this. And again, researchers in China have discovered, again, that semen of patients with COVID-19, right? The COVID-19 is in their semen. And what was Fauci's specialty? Dealing with infectious diseases and STDs. And where was he during the AIDS breakout? He was administering hepatitis B vaccines before AIDS. And gene drives are basically a technology that aims to target a species to go extinct, right? Judy Mikovits is among her generation's most accomplished scientists. Robert F. Kennedy. Dr. Mikovits joined NIH in 1980. Postdoctoral scholar in molecular virology at the National Cancer Institute, and began a 20-year collaboration with Frank Buschetti, a pioneer in the field of the human retrovirology. So she helped Dr. Buschetti isolate the HIV virus, and they wrote up a paper on it, and Fauci found out about it. He contacted her. Her boss was not her, her partner, the guy that she worked with, was not there. She told Dr. Fauci he wanted her to hand those papers over. She said, I cannot do that. I will not do that. Then he called and threatened her, because this is what these two do, force. So he called and threatened her. She still said no. And then he got in touch with Rossetti. He came and took it. Rossetti gave the papers to him. Came and took the papers to him, and then they held on to it for 6 months, allowing HIV and delaying mass testing and allowing HIV to spread and spread and spread. And then they finally went out and publicized in the newspaper about them finding the isolating the HIV virus. So you have to remember too, in the beginning of COVID, what was Dr. Fauci saying? No need to wear a mask. There's no reason to be wearing a mask. And I remember when he said that, I said, well, that's just crazy. It's like they want this disease to spread, right? And then even at that time, there were therapies. There was a thesis that Judy Mikovits had written, and it was about another appropriate therapeutic that would work for HIV, and it was peptid T, and it was discovered by Candace Pert back in 1986. And Fauci would not, didn't want to hear about it, didn't want anything to do with it. And that's the same thing with hydroxychloroquine, which, the WHO itself had said it was an essential medicine. It had 70 years of data. When this vaccine they're giving us has no information, and I'm trying to wrap my head around why we're forced, just because this man and some scientists that they get to come on TV, but we don't get to agree with the other side. We're being forced to agree with one side. We get to, when we hear something, and it has to do with our physical bodies, we get to think logically, morally, and individually. That means we get the opportunity, we have the free will to decide, wait a minute, that sounds like some crazy Frankenstein crap. You trying to shoot up my body. It's never been used before. You happen to get it fast-tracked in so that it can play whatever deviant role you want it to play as far as making you some money. But I'm not going to be your guinea pig for that, okay? Especially when I know there's things that work. And that's another thing. In my next shows, what we'll do is I know how to make herbal medicines. And we will look into some of the medicines, like with hydroxychloroquine. It actually comes from a cinchona bark. See that? And this is the bark here. And you can also get this in liquid form. And when you're starting to feel sick, you put this in your tea, or you can get the liquid form, drop it in your tea, and this will help clear it up. Because hydroxychloroquine, what it does is it stops that virus from replicating. And that's why they debunked it, because it goes in, it stops it, and it gets rid of that sour environment that the virus needs to duplicate. So with hydroxychloroquine, it cleaned up that environment. It was the opposite of what that virus, and that virus could not get in there and replicate itself in your body. So vaccine after vaccine, and still no cures, just more diseases and death and sterilizations. So recently, not recently, but back in 2010, there were deaths in a trial of the HPV vaccine in India. And the death of girls who were part of human papilloma virus vaccine that has raised an alarm about the nature of research in India. It was funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the vaccine is supplied by two companies, Merck Sharp, which is Merck, they just added another name to it, and Dome and GlaxoSmithKline, okay? This was done April 22nd, 2010, and this was done right after, guess what? Bill Gates had announced that he was going to do a global vaccine action plan, and it will enable greater coordination across all stakeholder groups, national governments, multilateral organizations, civil societies, and they will identify critical policy resources, and they will address all these diseases and come up with all these vaccines by 2012. And guess who he decided was going to lead it? Dr. Margaret Chan, Director General of WHO, and who else? Dr. Anthony Fauci. Okay, so now these two have met. These two have met. And all this time, Bill Gates had been trying to come up with a scheme, a way, in order to stop this population problem, how to slow down, how to push his genetic, gene-altering medicines, his biotechnology, to push it forward, because back in 2013, there was more yellow tape put up when there was a fight over being able to patent genes, and the courts said, you know, to one of the companies, is it Myers? I can't remember, one of the companies that was able to patent the breast cancer gene and ovarian cancer. And when they went to court, it was Thomas Clarence, I think, who said you cannot patent nature. But also what happened at the same time, technology companies were saying that you couldn't patent, I think it was like some kind of ideas, some kind of natural, something that also had to do with technology. So do you see, this was a double-edged sword. Bill Gates wants a way to remove that Supreme Court, to turn that over so all these patents can be released, not released, but so then they can start patenting. I mean, how much money can they make if they can patent all these genes they're making, all these monster genes, and all these things with technology can be patented just if it's an idea. Because remember, some of the technology they were talking about is being able to just use your mind, and you wouldn't even have to type. Your thoughts can be read. So if your thoughts can be read, you read someone else's thought, you're like, hey, I'm going to patent that idea. That was your thought, but hey, let me hurry and call that patent. So yeah, these are crazy people who are trying to think, and it's just a sickness. Like they're trying to beat you to the punch at everything instead of doing the right thing, right? Scientists are creating new incurable diseases in the lab. Swine flu, or H1N1, had been dead for 20 years when it suddenly reemerged in 1977 with a curious twist. The new strain was genetically similar to one from the 1950s, almost as though it had been sitting frozen in the lab since then. It was in a lab, and it was being chopped up and divided and put together with something else and no! No, it didn't just fall and go out the door. They were getting these little animals, okay? And this is how cross-contamination happens. You're doing your research on animals, and you're hurting these little animals, and you're injecting them, and that's why you find bats with coronavirus, and that's why you find lions with coronavirus, and that's why you find all these different animals with diseases, okay? Because you are cross-contaminating human biology and animal biology. You freaking Dr. Moreau's over there who want to make hybrid people panthers and stupid stuff like that, and robot people, and just craziness. I don't want to live in that kind of world. It's just, every time I think about this stuff, it makes my stomach turn because it's just disgusting. With the polio vaccine, even Dr. Fauci then, when Dr. Mikovits had found out that the reason these doctors and these kids were getting sick after this polio vaccine is because the vaccine was cultivated on pulverized mouse brain. So this contamination was making them sick. And when Dr. Fauci found out, he ordered Mikovits to keep her mouth shut. And when she refused, he illegally confiscated her workbooks and hard drives, drove her from government work, and blackballed her from receiving NIH grants. And let me tell you, that's what rich people are. That's the first thing they reach for, because I don't work for them. The first thing, I'm going to blackball you. And they're the most horrible piece of people. They shouldn't be working, but they got their nerve to try to blackball you because you want to be honest, because you don't want to see somebody get hurt. But because they want to continue on with their base and their baseness and their grossness, they try to take your livelihood from you. And it's just, you know, at some point we have to think for ourselves. We have to say enough already. And there are people who are out there, you know, stomping the pavement saying, because they're paying attention. And you'll see when I get there soon. Okay. Here we go, right here. This is a huge liability. This is Mikovits still saying the cover-up of 100 million people with contagious cancer-causing viruses. Look at our exploding cancer figures. Look at our exploding autism, chronic fatigue syndrome, AIDS-like diseases, autoimmune diseases. These are all from viruses that are acquired, not naturally, but through biological therapies. And this has been perpetrated by our government knowingly by Tony Fauci since that first explosion of HIV. Okay? So stop with your praising of these men and not taking a second look. We get blinded by the lights, you know? It wasn't until I started like working around billionaires with their private jets, and you know, you look at these big houses and you're like, oh, their lives. And once I get in there, and you know, my work allowed me to be around these families, and I would just see the depression and the anxiety and the, you know, half of them don't even like each other or want to be around each other. You know, you cannot judge a book by its covers. Stop thinking money makes people happy, because once they have it, it's never enough and it becomes like an illness. The history of animal testing goes back to ancient Egypt and found in the writings of the ancient Greeks, because everyone thinks it came from the Greeks. But let me tell you something, the Greeks had that kind of wisdom. They would have never fallen back into the dark ages and forgot all of that, you know, all that grossness. That would have never happened. But they've been doing experiments with animals since forever. So don't think that the plague and smallpox and things like that, cholera, which, who was that Mitch McConnell looked like he had on his hands, don't think that that is natural, because God doesn't make diseases. They are created. And viruses and bacteria that exist, you know, our body knows how to get rid of them. But because we've been directly injected with these animal mixes, you know, these vaccines, and it says that, and not only that, because our food's been poisoned, our water's poisoned, our environment's constantly poisoned. And listen, I'm no fan of Trump's, but when he started shouting hoax about climate change, I got what he was saying. He's not saying that climate change, we clearly see that the climate is changing, that the ice caps are melting. But what I don't understand is every time we get this environmentalist and they got all these followers and they're like, we have to save the environment, the ice caps are melting, Antarctica, it's turning to water, the polar bears. I'm like, what about up there? Piss in the sky with chemicals. I can't breathe. My nose hurt. My eyes itches. You know, no one's saying anything. So then I'm like, you know what? This isn't really about climate change. This is a hoax. These people aren't talking about. Because if you're telling me I can't have plastic bags, if you're telling me to recycle, if you're telling me to watch my carbon footprint, because I'm here on the ground causing problems to the atmosphere, and you can't tell these rich folks up here that are injecting the sky with crap, then that's a hoax. Because we need to, if you're going to go for it, if you're going to be out there gathering followers and sailing across oceans, come at me directly, and you talk to me about these people calling that shit fuel dumping, calling that stuff fuel dumps on my head, making my eyes itch. Now, so we've directly injected it. Oh, here we go. So this shows, in fact, for almost 40 years, as we've mixed animal and human tissues, it's called xenotransplantation. We've directly injected it in the blood and created many, many viruses that come from animals that would otherwise not have been introduced into humans naturally. That is, they can't infect human cells. So we were not going to be bothered by any of this till our scientists decided that they had to go playing God, mingling in this, touching on, just like Gates, like, what are you doing with these mosquitoes? Like, scientists have created a human pig chimera, raising the possibility of one day growing organs for transplant inside of another animal. Do you really think that's why they're doing it? Because I hear a lot about the good that's supposed to come out of these experiments, and so far I'm not seeing any of the good. I'm wondering why, when Fauci was over there playing with these monster viruses before he got caught in 2014, but I'm wondering why we were scrambling for a vaccine, because that tells me, brother, you had almost 8 years of playing with these viruses to come up with a vaccine, and you've had 53 years to come up with a vaccine for HIV, which, in fact, there's already a therapeutic vaccine. And Bill Gates, you've been playing with mosquitoes and dancing around Africa for 20 plus years, and they still have the same mosquitoes. There's still malaria, there's still Zika. I've heard no further movements on vaccines for malaria, for Zika. I've heard no scientific data on, except that these projects with the mosquitoes have been failed projects. NIH funded bat coronavirus research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology to the tune of $7 million. Now, I don't know, because I'm a degenerate, so I'm going to try to do some math here. So back in 2014, 200 scientists sent a letter to the Obama administration requesting they look into Fauci and his research at the U.S. government had placed a federal moratorium on gain-of-functions, GOF research, altering natural pathogens to make them more deadly and infectious. 2014, altering them to make them more deadly and infectious. This is 2014, 2020, 2019. Bill Gates, 2017, he's an oracle, blah, 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 blah. There's going to be a pandemic. At the same time, his friend Fauci is making a pandemic. So if we roll it back, if we do the math, these motherfuckers is lying, because they both knew what they were up to. Okay? I know I'm a degenerate, but I'm just trying to just look at the basic facts here. And then they told him to stop. Fauci, bring. Ooh, Fauci, this is Obama. I need you to get your hands off of them monster germs. I know you bored, little man. I know you just working in the background, saying you haven't been able to take anybody else's credits in Mikovits, because she's gone now, and so you can't steal her ideas. And no one cares about your other diseases because they're not really running rampant. So can you just put down them monster germs, right? So Fauci's like, oh man, I gotta stop doing this, and now they know, they done called me out here. Everyone knows what I've been doing in the lab. All these scientists, these goody two shoes, telling the president on me. What am I going to do? Gates, what can we do, Gates? In China, they'll let you do some stuff over there, I know, in their military labs. You see what I'm saying? These two are working together. Because Fauci, you tell me Fauci pulling millions and millions and millions and billions of dollars out of his pockets to fund this? No, because as of 2010, 4 years before this, he was already working for Gates. Okay? So let's not be confused. So due to the public health concerns, the U.S. government banned all federal funding on efforts to weaponize 3 viruses. Efforts to weaponize 3 viruses: influenza, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS. Okay? So what does Fauci do? He moves it over to a lab in Wuhan and licensed the lab. How do you walk out of America, go into China, license China, and give them $7 million because you're working with Gates? That's how you do it. 2019, in the hands of an infectious disease doctors as research, a new strand of COVID-19 is born. Okay? Just so you know, Corona has been around since, I think the first one was found in 1988. Okay? So Corona is not new. Oh no, here we go. So 1968, I gotta look at my own stuff. Dr. Fauci came to the National Institute of Health. We got all that, right? I just wanted to remind you of that date, 1968. The first 2 human coronaviruses were discovered in the mid-1960s. So we have, don't I have a little pointer here? I do. Pointer. Okay, so 1968. The first 2 coronavirus, mid-1960s, give or take a few, 1968. France doctor characterized the same virus isolated from a nasal swab that had been collected from a child in 1988. Okay, so working with coronavirus, then we get the AIDS, coronaviruses in the semen. Fauci was working infectious diseases, 1968, AIDS, human corona, 1960. You see what I'm doing? 1968, 1980, 1970, AIDS. This is looking mighty sus here. Okay, here we are, 2014, showing that Fauci was messing with monster germs. Florida and Texas residents fight back on okayed release of Frankenstein mosquito that cause infertility. So yes, the Texas and Florida releases of these GM mosquitoes, this is what you've been missing, okay? They're going to do this 2021. But my reasoning for saying January is that's why all this stuff is so you don't see what's blatantly in your face. With all the urgent crises facing our nation, the COVID-19 pandemic, racial injustice, climate change, the administration has used tax dollars and government resources for a Jurassic Park experiment, except without the island. And this was said through one of the residents, okay? While you've been distracted, Congress is debating again whether genes can be patented. That happened June 2019. Right before COVID was coming, we got them in Congress trying to release a gene patent. What's COVID-19? A gene patent vaccine. Okay? Now, gene patents, there had been about 30 of them. And then once it went to Supreme Court, they released the patents on all those genes. But what also happened in 2014, software patents took a blow. I want you to see that software patents. That would bring our friend Bill, right? From the Alice Corporation, Bank International's decision, which found a financial trading program to be an unpatentable abstract idea. Okay, so the gene patent also had to do, because in the software, people jumped in at 2014 and said, you cannot patent an abstract idea. Okay, what else have you missed? The Senate bill legislative session for 2019 to 2020 provides for the immunization of all children born after January 21st, 2019 against the human HPV. So basically, they're trying to force us to give our kids the HPV vaccine. What else happened? COVID-19 vaccine, first gene-based vaccine, is fast-tracked to begin use for the first time on humans, opening the floodgates of long-awaited gene-based Frankensteins to be distributed. The Trump administration, EPA, approved Oxytec, an experimental use permit, okay, where they will release. Females are the ones who bite and transmit disease. They're saying that they're only going to release the males, and then they go on to say about all this great stuff that has happened, which we know through what I've been telling you is a lie. Here it goes. See, they're waiting for this bill. They put it through July 2019. They did the draft. And people have been stomping the pavement. People are like, no, do not start this mess. We already said back in 2013 that this was a no-go. But here you go, Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina. And North Carolina, remember, that was the big state who wanted eugenics. That was the one. They were castrating and doing all kinds of crazy stuff in Delaware. Oxytec and Bill Gates continue to push their agenda, saying GM mosquitoes are safe, when in fact, however, scientific experts have questioned the validity of these studies, pointing to a 2019 study that examined the negative effect of Oxytec's mosquitoes in Brazil. So here you go, all these countries who are saying it was failed, it was false claims, littered with failures, no adequate risk assessments, no license, the females were biting and they can spread diseases, all this stuff, but yet they were still able to push their way into the United States to release these mosquitoes by 2021. Here it is right here. The public wants to know, what's the toxicity and allergenicity of the engineered proteins in the male mosquitoes? What are the possible increase in antibiotic resistance in the environment? What are the effects on food supply for insects, animals, and humans? What are the potential for disease transmission from GM mosquitoes and more? Oxytec say they have addressed all concerns, but experts say that's nearly impossible. They haven't addressed anything because Bill Gates is running who? Bill Gates is running the media. Because now, whenever you try to search up something on Fauci or Bill Gates, it's all the debunked. It's all saying that everything that's ever said about them that doesn't agree with them is crazy talk, is conspiracy theory, so anything that's negative about them never existed, and they're such great people. That's when you know you're being bamboozled, because that's some BS right there. Bill and Melinda Gates, DARPA, and NIH is forcing these lethal gene drive technologies even when real science proves natural cures. African trees kill both malaria mosquitoes and the parasite. January 25, 2017, a group of scientists produced extracts from the bark of an olan tree and found that it contained at least one compound that kills the mosquitoes that transmit the malaria parasite. But the bark also contains another substance that kills the parasite itself. The scientists have published their findings continually, and you might expect that the international pharmaceutical industry, or Bill Gates, who's been so active in Africa and the poor countries in South America, he's been so active. Why? Here it is. Here these group of scientists have found the answer. He doesn't have to inject all these mosquitoes. He doesn't have to source his money all over the place. Because, of course, somebody like that needs, by now, want to see returns on all this money he's put out, right? But the scientists have so far not been contacted. You know why? Because it's been published in scientific journals, which makes it difficult to obtain patent protection. So if Bill Gates can't make money off of this isn't his. And he's not trying to cure, let's all be real. He's not trying to cure malaria. He's trying to kill them folks in Africa. They are his guinea pigs. South America are guinea pigs because nobody cares. that this is happening to these people. And even when we do care, what are we going to do? We need to speak up, because now they're over here doing this crazy mess in America as well. So stop thinking that you're special. They're administering doses of diseases and Frankensteins when there are already known and safe cures. During an interview with 60 Minutes, Fauci, the infectious doctor expert, says there's no reason to be walking around with a mask, when in fact, Mikovits had told them in her PhD, award-winning PhD thesis, when AIDS and HIV was running rampant, that there was peptid T, okay, was a simple immune therapy and safe. And she says, I see the same scenario playing itself out. Now where he says, oh, it's anecdotal, oh, hydroxychloroquine or plaquenil, incidental evidence, which means it's not real, it's just kind of silly. First of all, hydroxychloroquine works, and what it does is, I told you, it stops this disease from replicating. And when you put it together with zinc, because zinc also stops diseases from replicating, bam, you have stopped the coronavirus. And the only reason that it was coming up in the news and saying that it was killing people was because these doctors, like they had paid to give vasectomies, these same doctors they were paying were killing people, because what they were doing, instead of giving them the recommended doses, they were overdosing them, and that's what was killing them. And any drug, just like you're going to see with this HPV, they were overdosing, and not even overdosing, they were saying they were overdosing, but this vaccine, these girls in India were a trial, and they weren't even supposed to be doing that. Here we have more studies in Africa. This was from 2016 to January 2020. There he was again, Fauci. Last month halted a highly anticipated clinical trial testing an investigational HIV vaccine. We already have an HIV vaccine, Fauci. We've had one since '86. After an interim review of data and safety monitoring, sure, there was a safety monitoring board. They had 2 vaccines, 50 years. And now, right around COVID, you got 2 vaccines, and you're up in South. Wait a minute, there's no HIV people in America? There's no AIDS, there's no HIV in America? There's no one you could do the study on, or maybe nobody trusts you since the hepatitis B vaccine. They enrolled 5,407 HIV negative volunteers in South Africa who were randomly assigned to the vaccine regimen or to the placebo injections. Why would they be negative? Study participants received 6 injections over 18 months and were offered standard of care for HIV. They said nothing happened, nobody was hurt, there was nothing, they just saw it wasn't working. I don't know how you know it's not working if it's HIV negative people. But all this, the reason I put this, because now what do we hear is coming out of South Africa when they halted it January 2020? Struggles to contain a second COVID strain. And who was over there? Who was doing more vaccine studies? Because disease follows this man. Never ever in the world of ever have Bill Gates or Fauci went into a place and left it the way they found it. They go in and they leave a disease. They don't ever find a cure. There's never a vaccine. They come in and disease follows. That's all I've read on these 2. Now, states are forcing the HPV vaccination. At least 4 jurisdictions, Rhode Island, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, require HPV vaccination for school attendance. Okay? The Republican governor of Texas, Rick Perry, has signed an executive order requiring girls ages 11 to 12. Now remember, the girls in India, when the government stopped the trials, 3 doses had already been administered to 30,000 participants, mostly tribal girls aged between 9 and 14. Poor children is who they injected with this. Okay? They were funded by Bill and Melinda Gates. Who was the company again? Merck. Death in a trial. Not death, deaths. And now, what did they pass through? 2020 while we've been busy? What did they pass through? HPV vaccinations. They are enforcing them in these states to go on these girls. What else did we find out here in the U.S.? That HPV and infertility, another STD that is causing infertility, and now it's being forced on our little girls. It said birth rates in the United States have recently fallen. Birth rates per 1,000 females ages 25 to 29. What was the date that Bill gave us? That the population was going to go crazy? 2015. So we've started the HPV on our kids. It's 2020. Give them by the time they're getting to their 20s, it'll be 2040 something. So by 2050, when we've sterilized most of our girls, he won't have to worry about the population, will he? He's done the math. Why is Fauci so happy about these vaccines? Moderna vaccine results stunningly impressive, Fauci tells. You make the disease, you delay the disease. You invest in the fake cure, supported by tech giants, you make lots of money. These people are not in the business of health and cures. They are in the business of disease and sick agendas. The NIH claims joint ownership of Moderna's coronavirus vaccine. These are your villains disguised as sages. Do you remember the California arson investigator who was able to find where all these fires were starting? They realized he was the one all along that was setting the fire. This man is not an oracle, okay? Fauci, for over 53 years, has been hiding behind the guise of searching for cures, from fake vaccine trials that bring diseases to unauthorized experiments that have even been halted by our government. Bill Gates has pretended to care for the people of Africa, but yet continues to push his own eugenics agenda with the help of several biotech companies, including the U.S. government. Countries asking him to stop, but like Fauci, they have their own agenda and refuses and pretends to be a philanthropist. Okay? So that's fine. That's fine. You say you're doing this. You say, Bill Gates, you're out because you want to stop malaria and Zika and Deng and all this. Fauci, you saying you're messing with these because you want to have a vaccine ready. Well, here we are. We're here. We're in the pandemic. So in all fairness, I ask you, if Bill Gates and Fauci's, these were their excuses. Bill, after 20 years, and Fauci after 53, where are their cures and vaccines? Because somebody, the government's not asking, nobody else is asking. I want to know, because I'm giving you a fair chance. Because Fauci, after 53 years, I haven't heard your name stamped on one vaccine. But here you are messing with these diseases almost 9 years ago. Before that, but I'm going to just go with 9 because that's when the government caught you. You were waiting on someone else to make a vaccine that we had to get fast-tracked. Bill Gates, they got trees that kill malaria. Wake up. Stop. So here it is. If these things are true, how do they keep, under the radar? And there it all is. Bill Gates owns the media. He's running WHO. He had Fauci help him out back in 2010. They started their collaboration on their Disease World Foundation, vaccine, because they were going to have vaccines by 2012. And all I can say is, Fauci, after 53 years, if you can't come up with a vaccine, I don't know what the heck you're doing. I don't know. I mean, I do know what you're doing, but I don't know why everybody else is pretending. Because, I do know why. Because the government's okay when you're sitting back there saying that what you're working on is a biological weapon, because we'll pay any amounts for war. We'll pay any amount to be a country that is sitting on top of the world and making other countries bow down to us. It doesn't matter the baseness or the grossness or whatever it takes, But when that backfires on us, how can you get rid of a man who knows all of your secrets as a country, as a government, who you were paying to do this thing for? You really can't, can you? What you have to do is just sweep it up and let it go and make us think that we're all blind and stupid. Well, we're not all blind and stupid. We may be what you call degenerates or, the low parts of society, but it's the humble, it's the meek who will inherit the kingdom of the world. Inherit the kingdom of God. It is the weak and humble. This false biology where you believe that that you are the strong or the top of the food chain. You're wrong, because it's the big and strong who have, died out. The dinosaurs, the giants. It's the Davids who are surviving and not the Goliaths. It's the soft little things that have continued to live and survive. The lion, there's no king of the jungle. He has no kingdom. The lion, after he's fed his belly, he sleeps side to side next to the same animals that he's hunted and killed. There is no top of the food chain. This is a biocentric world, and we were all meant to live together in it. So you guys have to get it together, because that's what karma is. Karma's coming back. And those who live in and swim in the mire and the muck of the grossness of the sadist things that they do, sadistic things that they do, it comes back, and it comes back hard. It might not be with you, but it will come back. And it is the sins of the forefathers that the sons and daughters have to pay for. So I would think hard, and I would think clear about what you're doing to the world and to people that you think are beneath you, because we all fall and we all hang ourselves. So on that note, pay attention, because the purpose of distractions is so you don't see what I'm just showing you. All right? And take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon, and I will be bringing you some tonics, medicinals, some stuff that you can grow on your own, things that you can make on your own, things you have around your home, and you don't have to spend a lot of money with. Take care. Talk soon. Peace.